Hey, it's David. Let's draw a line under these mudguards on the bobber. So I need these mudguards now done for the next season. I'm still going to use them on dry days when a little bit later in the year when it's a bit colder. There'll be salt on the road, but so long as I protect them properly, that'll be fine. But that does mean what I do need to do is to get a coat of paint on them. I can't just leave them in the bare steel because they are starting to rust up, and I don't want that to happen. Now, it's not going to be a proper paint job. It's just going to blow a coat of paint over it to protect them until the season turns and I can get round to doing them properly, and by which time there will be other bits on the bike, mounts and such, which also need painting. But before I can paint them, I do need to finish off the basic preparation. It's not going to be the final paint preparation where I'm worried about filling in all the little gaps and everything else, but I do need to deal with the major flaws. Things like where I've welded and ground back and there's a gap where the weld wasn't filled and that sort of stuff. So I just need to go over them and do the basic work to make them look presentable, and then I'm going to blow a coat of paint over them, and then they'll be done and ready to go on the bike, and I can move on to doing the other things like the rear lights and the indicators that it needs before it's completely rideable in its current form. So let's get on and get that done. The sort of thing I'm looking at here on the front mudguard is these gaps here where the weld hasn't gone all the way. Now I could just grind back smooth, that's one option, or I could fill in some weld and then grind over the top of it, and I think that's what I'm going to try and do. There's a bit of a gap at the end here that needs filling, and it's the same here. So you can see, although this is ground back a little bit, there's some gaps that just need sorting out. And also here, see, you got a little bit of rust coming through, just because this is unprepared steel and it's just sitting in the shed where it's a little bit damp, and it has been out on the bike, although it's been dry whenever I've had it out on the bike. So just little bits and pieces like this. So let's get the welder out, let's do some filling and see what we can do. Now, things like these marks here are from being clamped in the vise. My vise only doesn't have proper smooth jaws on it. They're quite aggressive jaws, and they do mark this up. Now, to file this, get this all the way out, would just thin this metal down possibly a bit too much. So this will probably get filled in either with paint or with a very fine filler when we come to actually do the proper paint job. But I'm not going to do it for this stage, and I'm not going to do it on the initial blow over of paint, and actually it's quite a thick paint, so it might well, when it eventually gets rubbed down to be redone, actually fill it anyway. Let's do some grinding. mudguard is now sitting reasonably square, and the tension has been taken out, so now I can take these out without this mudguard springing away. It's not being pulled in by the bolts, it's just being held in place by the bolts. And for all that this looks remarkably thin and skinny, you do have to remember it is the same material as the mudguards, and that is absolutely rock solid. That's not going anywhere, which surprises even me. But no, seriously, it's all fine. So now what I need to do is start work on the detail of things, and my starting point is going to be the spacers. You can see that bolt was way too long, by the way. That's not staying, in case anyone is worried about it. It's not staying. That will be replaced by something smaller. It would be nice if I could kick this over a little bit more, but if I kick this over a little bit more, I wouldn't actually be able to get the mudguard out. Now, if I'd gone for a top mount mudguard, wouldn't have these issues, but they have their own issues, and I can always, if I do have issues, I can always go for a top mount. It's no big deal. It's just welding in a strip of metal and bolting it down. So, carrying on with this, next step, I say spacers. Just ground a little bevel there, that looks better. Not much, that's all it needed. Right, let's get a couple of tacks on those, and then we can start cleaning up the brackets, making it fit the mudguard, rounding off the corners, and so forth. Right, quick coat of primer over everything. Not going overboard with the primer. It's an etch primer. I'm just giving it a single coat. The reason I'm only giving a single coat is this isn't a proper coat of paint, as I explained earlier. It's just a blow over to tide it over the winter. And also the paint I'm using doesn't actually need a primer at all. So anything the primer doesn't hit, the paint will get. And as I say, this will all be rubbed back and so forth come spring when it gets a proper coat of paint, or whenever that might be. But for now, quick coat of primer. Put my teeth back in, and now leave it for a couple of hours to dry, and then we'll come back and we'll get that first coat of black over this. So catch you in a minute. A couple of hours gone by, primer's dry and ready to go black. Now, if I were doing this properly, I'd be painting the insides of this first and then doing the outside afterwards, so I got a nice good finish on the outside. But as you may have picked up from that quick glance at it, there are a few flaws in the, not so much in the paint, because the paint actually looks quite good, but there's some flaws in the metalwork which need to be addressed when the time comes to do the paint properly, a little bit of filler and so forth, as I mentioned before. But for now, let's just get the black on and get it ready to be used over the winter, so that come the better weather we can redo this and make a better job of it. A long session in the shed today, and one which I have just pushed through as hard as I could to try and get it all done and out the way, at least for now. It's the phase of builds that I probably like the least. You may have picked up on this already from the fact that I keep going, okay, I've done this, and I'll prepare it for paint later. I find it a little bit tedious to say. It's not something I particularly enjoy. So today I've pushed through it, and I've pushed through it without actually doing much talking and explaining, because I don't think there's an awful lot of value that I could add to what you can see in the video. The mudguards are now painted and they are just drying. I know it's the nature of this paint, particularly now that it's cold out, that it will take a while to dry, and I don't need to put them on the bike just at the moment, so they're going to sit there and they're going to dry probably for the rest of this week. So thanks very much for watching, coming along and bearing with me in this process of getting it sort of closer to the finish point on the mudguards. So I will see you guys again soon.